Hello all, and I'm back with another comic book vid on this channel, and this is another video response to Nightmare Baller 1's comic book channel, Nightmare Comics 1. He did a video talking about his top 5 Batman stories, and I thought I would add, because for the most part, we have I think there's only 2 books out of the 5 that are the same, and mine are a little different, and I don't have only have one of what I think most people call the big 3 Batman stories, as I'm not a big fan of the other 2, being Arkham Asylum. I've never been a big fan. I like it, but I'm not a big fan of it. And Year One, I'm not a big fan of Year One books. Never have been. There's very few that I've ever liked. As I've said, the Green Hornet Year One happens to be by far my favorite Year One. Though there is a Year One-esque story on this list, but we'll get to that in a second. These are, as I said, my favorite Batman stories. They are the 5, and in fact, I would say these 5 to me are head and shoulders above just about anything else. And I know a lot of people won't agree with that, but for me personally, they are. I was never, when I first got into comics, I was never a big Batman fan. And one of these stories turned me into a Batman fan. And the uh, and the stuff that is not on this list is the stuff that that really, when I was really diehard into Batman, was on there. And so there's a lot of stuff that a lot of people would put on this list that I still probably wouldn't put on this list, because there's other stuff that I would put ahead of it that's not on this list that probably not everyone else would, if that's complicated enough for you. But let's get on with the list. The first is a book that probably everybody at least knows of. I definitely think everyone should read. Out of everything on this list, I would say that nothing on this list is the definitive Batman story. Um, there's not a story on here that I think you go, this is what every Batman story should be. This is the closest to it, though. And that is A Death in the Family, which, of course, is the death of Jason Todd, the second Robin. I can remember when this happened, and I was never, and I still I still am this way. Never a collector, quote unquote, of comics. I was never someone that collected comics thinking they were going to be worth money. I collected what I read and bought what I liked. That's what I did, and I was never a big Batman fan, and per se. I mean, I liked Batman, but I was never a big Batman fan. And one of the reasons was because the stuff of Batman I liked, you normally didn't get. And this story was one I wanted to read just because it was the death of Robin. It was a big deal, and so my parents actually bought it for me for Christmas. And I still have that original collected graphic novel, which I love. It's used, bent up, not tore up, but it's definitely, you can tell I've read it many, many times. I read it at least once a year, sometimes more than that. Um, Depending on when I want to read it. But it is just an awesome story if you've never read it. It defines Bruce Wayne and defines Batman for pretty much up until even now. They've spoiler, they brought Jason Todd back. In comic books, no one stays dead, unfortunately. They even brought back Bucky, which I could go on a 30-minute rant on that bullshit. But anyways, I don't care. I don't care how awesome he is. He never should have been brought back. Anyways, so yeah, so this story is the story where Jason Todd dies, and Jason Todd was not a very likable character. He was very much a streetwise punk, and that's not what people wanted Batman to be, or Robin to be. They wanted, Dick Grayson. I mean, that's what people wanted. They wanted Dick Grayson, or someone closer to Dick Grayson. So they killed off Robin. It really was a big deal, and yeah, and was treated as a big deal because you had lasting effects. I mean, you didn't magically just have a Robin show back up, even though eventually DC kind of gave in and said, okay, we need to have a Robin. Due to this story, Joker was gone for a long time, and they teased Joker's return for a long time because of this story. So if you've never read it, you definitely should take the time to read it. That's definitely what I would say. Then it's one of my favorites. Then we have Gotham by Gaslight, which is, I think this was the first Elseworlds DC book I ever read, and that what that is that's a non-DC universe story. Basically, you take DC universe characters, you take them out of the DC universe, and kind of tell a story that way. And often they're often the best DC stories, to be honest. And which you could debate why that is for hours, but this one was Batman set in the at the tail end of the 19th century and at the turn of the 19th century, and is a really good story. It is pretty much it's pretty much Batman Year One set in that time, set in a turn of the century Gotham, and really tells the tale of Batman. Now I believe if you get the graphic novel that this is in, it is included with the sequel, and the sequel is not very good at all. But this one really is. It really tells a really good story. It is Batman, and the villain in here. I won't give away who the villain is because I think when you find out who the villain is, it just makes the story that much more interesting. But it's not a traditional Batman villain, which makes it even that much better, in my opinion. Then we have the Son of the Demon. This story this is actually the first graphic novel I ever bought, was Son of the Demon. It came out, I was at the comic book shop, or I was at the comic book shop, I don't know if it was when it first came out, but I was at the comic book shop, and Son of the Demon, saw Son of the Demon, and was like, wow, that looks really cool, the cover, and read the back. Of course, I was not a big Batman fan, and this is actually the story that turned me into a Batman fan. This book. So, and if you don't know what the book is about Batman teaming up with Ra's al Ghul, one of his probably Batman, his most respected, nemesis, and the one that he is kind of the most like. And this story really shows the dynamic between those two characters, him and Talia, who's Ra's al Ghul's daughter. This was big stuff. I didn't know who Ra's al Ghul was. I just knew, the basic, kind of rogues gallery that Batman had, and didn't know about this guy. And the guy at the comic book shop explained to me who everyone was when he saw I was going to get it, and I asked him, what is this about? And he kind of, without spoiling it, kind of explained to me who everyone was. So when I read it, I had a better understanding, and this is some awesome stuff. For a long time, this wasn't a book that was part of the Batman or the DC universe, and now it has been turned into a story that is about the Batman DC universe, or is part of it, which is kind of cool to see. But just an awesome story, and like I said, it's definitely one of my favorites. So there you go. Then we have The Killing Joke, which of course is Alan Moore doing a Batman story, which I'm sure some people will be like, wow, Alan Moore did a Batman story. Yes, he did. Alan Moore, does do superheroes, and he does superheroes better than just about anybody. And when I say that, I don't mean like redoing superheroes like he did, not like Swamp Thing, not like, Watchmen, nothing like that. I'm talking about the two issue arc he did for Superman, the stuff he did, which is very underrated in my opinion, in Supreme, which I know a lot of people are like, what's Supreme? Go look it up. Really good telling of it. Just I love those books. His whole Tom Strong series just really showed that, he does love superheroes, and he can tell a superhero story almost better than anybody. This is, if you don't know, this is how Barbara Gordon, Batgirl, became not Batgirl and became Oracle, because she got shot by Joker and paralyzed. And it's kind of the aftermath of that, and it's a excellent Batman story. Really good stuff. He really captures, Batman and kind of the relationship Batman has with Joker, and all of the other things that kind of go into it. Just an awesome story, as you would expect from Alan Moore, and just really, 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 really good stuff. Then we have probably the most famous, probably the one most people know of. This shouldn't be any surprise. This is my number one, which is Return of the Dark Knight. If you've never heard of Return of the Dark Knight, which I would be shocked if none of you have, but this is, a lot of people say this is the definitive Batman story, and I don't think that's the case, because to me this isn't what everyone that came after this book written by Frank Miller. This is not what Batman should be. This is what Batman becomes. And one of the reasons he's the way he is in this book is because of the death of Jason Todd. This is very much another, this is a Batman set in the future. I think he's supposed to be in his 50s or 60s in this story. I can never quite remember how old he's supposed to be, but he's supposed to be fairly old. And the whole premise is that he's hasn't been Batman for a long time, and he finally becomes Batman because Gotham needs him. There's that. There's kind of how Robin in this becomes Robin, and this is Markeem Nightmare Baller. He said the same thing that I feel. This is my favorite. This is probably my favorite book of that I have ever read, and I include novels. This is it. And when I was in college and I had creative writing classes and I would write stories and this and that, I would steal from this like you wouldn't believe. There is a fight scene, and I'm not giving anything away here, but there's a fight scene where Batman basically takes on a leader, and it's kind of one of the focal points of this story. Kind of one of the underpinning stories is that there's this gang called the Mutants, which is meant to be a play on words, and Batman basically takes on the leader of this big huge gang called the Mutants, and the reason why Batman fights him, because Batman doesn't have to fight him, but the reason why he does is so Bruce Wayne, because it's very much he sees him as a challenge and he doesn't know if he can actually beat this guy, so he actually wants to fight him. And it is just one of the most awesome fight scenes I've ever seen in comic books, ever seen in literature, to be honest, in my opinion. I love it. I love that whole thing. It is just awesome stuff. And you also get kind of the first where Batman and Superman are friends but don't necessarily have the same worldview, which if you've ever Frank Miller did an interview about this, and he said these two have very different outlooks on the world and outlooks on life, and maybe they would be acquaintances and maybe they would be friends, but they wouldn't necessarily, they would be friends that either A, didn't like each other really, or friends that kind of that kind of friend, or two friends that were always at each other's throats because they don't see the world in the same way. And I completely agree with that. I know some people don't. I know some old time comic book fans have said, that I don't see it that way. I do. I think I think if you really look at it, they look at the world in a very different place. And this whole story is like that. It's a very dark story. It's a very gritty story. It's very much a Batman story. And it's a story that I think if you just understand the concept of what Batman is as a character, you can pick up, you can read, and just be like, wow, this is awesome. And luckily, they are apparently going to finally make an animated feature of Return of the Dark Knight, which I'm looking forward to seeing how they're going to do this, because this story does not protect the Batman, Superman, the DC universe. It doesn't make it the cheery place that it always is. It makes it a much darker place, and this story is not a story I don't think you would normally see, because it doesn't protect those characters the way DC likes to protect them. But anyways, that's my top 5. I might do a top 5 of Superman 2 at some point. I've thought about that after doing this. But like I said, this is more of just a response to Markeem. So with that, I'm out. Have a good one. Later.